Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
There we go. Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, welcome into the program. And hey, how you doing? Hopefully you are doing well. And we are just setting up here. Sorry, a little frazzled. But everyone, welcome into the Computer America Show. Today on the program, we have none other than Mr. Dariush Derakhshani. And he is our resident graphics expert, does everything with graphics cards, hardware, software, workstation systems. This is your guy that you really want to listen to, and we are, of course, happy that he could join us. So he'll be joining us here in just a moment, but before we do, everyone, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including a link to any articles. That's where you'll find, that's where you'll find everything from a link to our guest website to any videos that we show, anything that we talk about will be in one place at computeramerica.com. And so with that being said, also live video portion and tons of articles. Everyone go check that out. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to give Dariush a ring, bring him on, and just get started. So everyone, here we go. Dariush Derakhshani, let's go ahead and give him a call. And I guess this episode, brought to you by Skype. So Dariush, hi, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing?
Great. How are you guys?
You sound wonderful. So we're doing well. Thank you. And there we go. Now we see you. And so welcome back onto the program. And hopefully you've been well. I know last month I think we missed, but hopefully you're doing well. You're good to go and ready to talk about some graphic stuff.
Yeah, all is good. I hope you're going well as I hope you're going.
No problems.
I hope you're doing well as well. There you
Perfect.
go.
There we go. Yeah, no problems whatsoever. So I think, and you sent over a bunch of topics. We're going to talk about those in just a bit. But at the same time, I think I want to throw you off your game and start with something different. And this is something that happened just yesterday, I believe. And it is all about the iMac 2019 refresh and update. I don't know how much of that you saw. It was, Apple released a press release, and it wasn't a complete redesign. It's still an iMac. It's everything that you know and love, but they updated the hardware that you can purchase with the iMac. So I think we'll start with that, and then we'll get to the other topics that you sent over. But before we get started, let's go ahead and just get your initial opinion on iMacs. I mean, they seem to be like for a lot of artists and studio recorders or people who make music seem to really enjoy iMacs. What's your feeling as kind of a workstation?
Yeah, I actually use an iMac at school a little bit. They're fine. Actually, I had a chance to test out the iMac Pro probably earlier or actually later last year, and compared it with an HP Z Studio desktop as well, and it was pretty surprising how powerful the iMac Pro was compared to the workstation from HP. The regular non-Pro iMacs, aren't as beefy as the iMac Pros, but the system itself is a pretty nice system. It's elegant. It's got a nice screen overall. But I have to say that the Macs that we've used in the last few years, their screens have been a little problematic. They look good, but I think the actual hardware, I see a lot of ghosting and a few other display issues with the panels themselves. So hopefully they fix that with their supplier with this new round. But the screens are, really nice. The color range is good. They perform well. For me personally, I wouldn't invest in one because I prefer to build my own
Mm-hmm.
so that I can continuously upgrade the way I want.
Right.
And I find the Mac ecosystem to be a little bit too closed off for that. And I think the old trash can Mac Pros were a huge mistake, and I think Apple sort of acknowledges that, and I'd be curious to see what they do in the Apple Pro market. But as far as the iMac goes, it's a great computer for a lot of just everyday sort of use, price notwithstanding. For studio use, I think it makes a lot of sense because it's a small form factor.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you get a whole system in the space that it takes you to put down a monitor anyway.
Right.
So I think that's really nice. And as far as the Adobe suite and all that kind of stuff, Mac is really excelled with being able to integrate with that software and have great performance to those.
I,
Uh,
I do have to say though that there's something weird about iMacs where Craig has an iMac. He's been using one and he really really desperately wants kind of the 2019 one. But iMacs are so weird because I guess it's the form factor and the engineering. They're big in the aftermarket where people will buy them and swap out the hardware and really try to tweak them to be upgraded. But it's something about that form factor, like you said. It's all in one. It's the space of a monitor. You get a full system,
Yeah.
and his iMac from 2012, 2013. We took we were talking to it wasn't an Apple store, but it was like a secondhand only deals in iMacs and Apples, and they still offered him $900 for it, and it was man, these things something about iMacs, they kind of hold their value. I'm not saying that he paid $900 for it in 2013,
Sure.
but he paid way more than that. But they hold their value like computer hardware just usually doesn't. So
Yeah, I think iMacs are really convenient for a lot of people, and there's an ease of use. If you put a Windows machine down in somebody's home, they're not going to have as easy of a time generally as they will with a Mac, because it's the same reason I switched from a Samsung phone back to an iPhone, is because of that walled garden. It's annoying in some ways because I'd love to customize things,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I just know everything's going to work. And the Samsung S9 that I used to have, it was great. I had all sorts of different apps and customizations on it, but the basic phone functions were crashing. The actual phone app kept crashing over and over again. My contacts app kept crashing over and over again, and I gave up on it because of that. I just wanted simplicity, and a lot of people are the same way with computers, where I'm able to debug and fix and figure out what's wrong with my computer a lot of the time. That sort of thing doesn't happen on a Mac. My case is also a little bit different because I rely on Maya and some other 3D programs that, in my experience, Maya has been out on the Macintosh for a really long time. There's a lot of great design studios, a lot of places that use Maya on iMacs and regular Mac Pros.
Mm-hmm.
But I've noticed that Maya in particular just doesn't run as well on a Mac as it does on Windows. And of course, it runs best on Linux.
Right.
But I've noticed all sorts of little weird things coming up, more so on Maya running in a Mac lab than I have in a PC lab. So for me, there's a strike against the iMac for my professional use. But at the same time, my wife has a MacBook that's it's the last 17-inch version of that MacBook.
Mm-hmm.
She loves it. She uses it whenever she can. It's outdated and it's slow, but it's still her daily computer for just general stuff. So there's a lot to be said for that. Their build quality is actually excellent. It really is excellent build quality when you look right down into it.
And something that I think I've only seen from Apple. I'm sure that other PC manufacturers have taken a hint from Apple, as they are wont to do, and they push on their 27-inch display, not so much the 21-inch, but the 27-inch 5K resolution. 5K, we've heard 4K. We're seeing, I think Google just yesterday was talking about their desire to go to 8K. 5K, not so much, not really a standard, but it's something that Apple has been pushing for a couple of years now. Is that worth, kind of mentioning?
Yeah, I mean the way they integrate their display with OS X is really, really nice. Something that the Windows really needs to catch up to. The 5K, what it boils down to is just the crispness of that display is really impressive, really, really impressive. I have 4K with Windows 10, and it's also nice and crisp. However, just the scaling features in Windows are pretty terrible. Meaning, if you look at text, like let's say a 12-point font on an HD screen versus a 4K screen versus a 5K screen, that font is going to look smaller and smaller on the larger screens. That's just normal. So the OS scales that text up for it to look the same size as it would on an HD screen to make it comfortable to read, but it adds an extra crispness to it and clarity that is really, really nice. Windows 10 does that pretty well, except when it comes to certain 3D applications and professional digital content creation, DCC applications, where it doesn't scale well at all. And then you're left with really tiny text for the menus and things like that. And if you try to scale it, the UI doesn't scale properly in all places of Maya, for example. So it gets really, really awkward. So as far as Macs go, the way that they scale things is really quite nice. So that crispness comes through, even though that really small font has been scaled up for you by the operating system to make it more readable. So here again with the 5K, I think it's just the fact that that display is getting a really nice clarity to how sharp it looks, and it is astounding. It's really, really nice. I wouldn't expect that. I get that out of Mac when I'm running Maya on a Mac, and it's scaling the UI up. It works great, but when I rely on my Windows machine at home to scale up as well, it doesn't. So I don't. So I ended up having to get 8 inches away from my screen and squinting when I'm looking some of this tiny text.
Gotcha. Now, and something that was spotted by another article, and I wanted your reaction to this because it got some reaction around the internet. And this is by 9 to 5 Mac. They said that Apple is adding some new configuration options to the iMac Pro today. So this is the iMac and the iMac Pro, but the iMac Pro came with a little bit of an update as well, where they will let you add 256 gigabytes of RAM. And of course, you're going to be paying just a mere $5,200 for it. But 256 gigs of RAM. Everyone's kind of scratching their head thinking, what good is that even for a lot of people out there? And maybe you could shine some light on why such an extreme, why something to such an extreme end would be available. But I mean, the iMac Pro 256 gigabytes of RAM.
Oh wow, they're still sticking with the trash can, aren't they?
Yep.
That's a mistake. That's a mistake. I have 48 gigs of RAM on my machine at home, and I push a lot of textures, and I push a lot of large files, and I push a lot of memory intensive things. So for me, 256 gigs probably is overkill. I think 48, 64 is probably a pretty good headroom for what I do, and I do a lot of work at home.
Oh,
256, I think.
and sorry for interrupting you real quick. Not the Mac Pro, the iMac Pro. That's
Oh, the
the one too.
iMac Pro.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was looking
yeah,
wrong.
the same thing. It's probably useful for a number of people,
Mm-hmm.
because you can load a lot of stuff into RAM. And keep in mind too,
There it
you
is. Yep.
can take a chunk of your RAM, you can turn into a RAM cache.
Mm-hmm.
So you can load things as if it were a super fast hard drive. So there's some benefits to it. 256 probably wouldn't be something that I would shell out a lot of money for. And I would advise people to kind of take a look at their current memory usage before they shell out that 5 grand for that extra memory. But I think for a lot of digital content people, 64, even up to 128 gigs is really good already. I think 64 is probably the place to be.
Mm-hmm.
32 is an absolute minimum. Probably sweet spot for a lot of people is at 32.
Right.
But yeah, 256, it's nice to have as an option, but I don't know
And
if I would ever peg that. But I do know people that would probably hit that memory pretty well.
right. So and on top of that, it's ECC memory error. I think that's like error correcting something or other like that. So it doesn't run as fast as other memory as per my understanding, but it's much more stable. So like you said, when you have those large workloads, it's not going to mess up on you. It's going to be really good. So 256. Again, this was part of the iMac and the iMac Pro refresh, and kind of new options. And by the way, I don't know if you have anything to say about the Radeon Pro Vega 64X that they kind of throw in there, or the essentially the AMD Pro Vega line of graphics cards
Mhm.
that Apple uses.
The specifically that one I can't speak to, but I mean, you look at that configuration. That's a $13,000 computer. That's a modest car
The whole thing
right
comes.
there.
The whole thing can cap out at about 16,000. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy. I mean, that amount of money is to me crazy. You could get probably four really good high-end workstations for that kind of price. You can probably get four pretty good iMacs for that. The iMac Pro that I had tested out late last year was I think about $5,500.
hmm
The way it was spec'd out, I think it was a 32 gig with an i9 processor. It wasn't top of the line, but
5,500 is
five
pretty darn
grand
good.
for
Yeah.
256 gigs of memory. I think that's nonsense. Personally, not so much the price, but I think the need for it. I think there's going to be a very small subset of people that will push that configuration up to 16 grand as you have it right now.
Yeah, not many people will actually do it, and I'm sure that the people that will, or the people that can use something like this $16,000 computer are even smaller than those who will actually buy it. So I'm sure this is Apple just kind of throwing the option and saying, here's what you can do, but hey, let's be honest here. Like you said, save yourself $5,000 and just go with the 64 gigs of memory or RAM, and yeah, that's and besides that, we've seen kind of the aftermarket, and I think even Apple themselves start to endorse them, where you can buy these kind of external units, and they can have extra RAM, they can have extra GPU. We've talked about it here on the show with you. Even if you don't get it built into your iMac, you can still get the hardware later, kind of like as an add-on. So, but yeah, overall, just want to throw Apple, just came out yesterday. I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard about it, so wanted to go over some of the specs with you. And yeah, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as 16,000. You can buy a nice car, right off the lot for that, or
You can buy
get
half a Tesla for that.
exactly, or you can buy an iMac Pro. But it's a status symbol. Apple is well known as kind of like hey, this is, performance aside and workflow aside and that kind of thing, having an iMac sitting on your desk is, it's very eye catching. So
Yeah, it is. And to be fair, I mean, they are wonderful machines. They work really well. The problem that I've seen, that I've heard from firsthand accounts, is that after a couple of years, there's for professional users, there's not much you can do aside from getting another one.
right, sell it
And
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 upgrade.
and I think that ends up being limiting. I think that's one of the things that hopefully they've listened to, the engineers at Apple, and that the next iMac, or I'm sorry, the Mac Pro would be more scalable than the current design, which is cool, looks good, but after a couple of years, you're gonna end up needing more.
Yeah. It's and really that same complaint can be echoed through almost every product line that Apple kind of makes, everything from their phone to their Mac Pro to their
Right.
iMac.
And again, I mean, Ben, to be fair, a lot of people don't like to get into the guts of their computer. So
That's true.
even if they buy, a PC, a Lenovo or an HP or whatever, they have no intention of upgrading stuff in a couple of years. So it might as well be good enough,
I do,
for
yeah.
them to go that route.
I
So,
I, I,
I
I do
can't
want to say
judge.
that the MacBook Pro, I do want to say that they made it so that the end user could swap out the memory and the hard drive. Something about that where they like, I think it was the MacBook Pro where they let people start to tinker with it. Completely, not every little facet of it, but parts of it.
Yeah,
Parts of it.
those things for people that are comfortable should be
Yeah.
available, should be allowed
There you go.
for them to do. I mean, I've done it on my MacBook Pro, swapping out a hybrid hard drive in to make it a little bit faster. That
Right.
stuff should be fairly easy to do. In the long run, though, those trash can Mac Pros, you just can't. You can't do anything with them. You can't upgrade graphics. You can't upgrade memory to an easy extent. You can upgrade the memory, but I think there's just not a lot of headroom
Yeah.
and stuff like that for. However, a lot of users don't do that, so they might as well go in for an all-in-one system if that's the case. But there's a shelf life attached to something that you can't physically open. Like, for example, I've had the same power supply and the same case
Mm-hmm.
and the same cables and some of the same interface cards and the same video card for years and years and years and years. But I've had different CPUs, processors, memory, all that kind of stuff. I'm able to swap in and out, but it does take some intestinal fortitude
Right.
to be able to do that. So
And I completely understand. So with that being said, we're gonna swap over from the Macs, and you sent over a number of topics. Anyone out there who would like to check this out, you can of course check it out at computermaker.com. We're gonna throw all the links there. And of your list, I was actually pretty interested in just jumping right into, because clearly we both had our coffee, we are both on the top of our game, quantum computing. This is something that is very simple, very intuitive, and so I felt like we could talk about this. But all jokes aside, that was all sarcasm. I will say, though, that, let's see, let me check the calendar. If anyone out there is interested in this topic, I'm not sure where we're going to take this, but I will say that if anyone else is interested, February 19th. Actually, funny story, the day before, we were actually going to talk with Dariush last month, but February 19th, no. I take that back. No, that's when we had him on, but I think we actually played it sometime in like March 4th, I think. We had IBM's research on to talk about quantum computers. We had Dr. Bob Suter. He was the vice president of IBM Q Strategy, and of course, talking about quantum computers directly with IBM. So this was interesting because less than a month ago, we had IBM on talking about quantum computers, and then you're like, hey, let's talk about quantum computing. And I'm like, all right, I understood none of that with Dr. Suter, so let's talk about it again.
Yeah, there's I can't say there's a whole lot I understand about it either. I think the takeaway from it is pretty
Although I will say I don't have a subscription to Business Insider, lovely publication, but I
yeah,
can't
you
get to
know
the
what?
article.
I'm
So
getting the same
yeah,
issue. I
yeah,
was able to read it earlier, but now it's kind of locked off behind the subscription
yeah.
model. But that's too bad. A lot of readers may
I
have wanted to get into that.
Right. I guess the quantum, or this article about quantum computer, is that of course IBM is working on it. Microsoft has made motion that they're working on it. Intel has their own division. Google has it. It seems like this article, and admittedly I can't scroll through it just like you can, but quantum computers seem to be a topic of conversation for every tech company. It's like how every car company is now making self-driving cars. They know that that is going to be a large section of their audience, is going to be automation and self-driving cars. Computers, same way. They know that quantum computers are coming. What excited you about this topic altogether? I mean, was it just the idea that unlimited computing power, or what was it?
I think it's the next generation, because we're hitting the 5 gigahertz sort of ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Processors can only go so fast before they start having errors and not working out. Basically, they're trying to make the dies, the size of the CPUs, the little circuit boards, smaller and smaller and smaller, which increases efficiency and speed. However, there's only so small you're going to be able to get before there's interference between all the different electrons
Right.
flowing around, tracing around on the circuit board. So this is a technical evolution that I think is most likely going to hit the mainstream computer user probably in about a dozen years, give or take. And basically, what it is, the current technology with CPUs is based data on ones and zeros,
Mm-hmm.
because all these circuits are either open or they're closed.
Right.
So based on ones and zeros, you can have all this data. The idea of quantum computing is, instead of just having a binary switch, whether it's on or off, whether it's a 0 or 1, there's a third position for these electrons, these qubits, or whatever they call them, the
That's right.
quantum
Qubits. Yeah.
particles. They could be either on or off, or they can be both, which is weird, and I don't understand quantum mechanics at all. But basically, what it means is, instead of being a 0 or a 1, you can now have a 0, a 1, or a 2, meaning you, for each of your bits of information, you can have 3 outcomes as opposed to just 2, which exponentially increases the amount of data you can process, the amount of data you can store, because of that extra position in that bit. So a quantum computer will be able to run a lot more processes a lot faster at an exponentially larger and faster scale than what we have now. And I think once that happens in the scientific and visualization, which is sort of what's going on now, and in the world of AI, that's when it's going to start trickling into more of the mainstream computers, and CPUs will become more quantum based. I don't know if it'll ever be stable enough to really take off as a home appliance sort of thing like computers are
Well,
now,
yeah.
but it seems to be technically the thing that's going to have the most promise at this point as far as the next evolutionary step.
Well, yeah, and again, the reason that IBM was on was that they were talking about their new IBM Q System 1. And the Q System 1 was this idea that, like, I remember about 3 years ago we had IBM on, and they were talking about the quantum computer. It was in this giant lab. If anyone has been in the bowels of a university or something like that, they know what a research lab looks like, and it took up the entire room. Like, we joke about back in the 40s or 50s that a computer was a room, like people were standing inside a computer. That's what a quantum computer was a couple of years ago. IBM came on to talk about their system, their Q System 1, and you can kind of see a video here. If you're watching the video portion, you can see a diagram of a person standing outside of it, and great. That's everyone, commercial. We'll be right back. More Computer America right after this.
It's just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on there. And everyone, I apologize. I ran completely over the commercials. So everyone, welcome back into the Computer America Show. And by the way, if you missed any part of our conversation so far, you should definitely check that out. Very, very recent topics with Dariush Derakhshani. And you can find that wherever podcasts are heard. And, of course, at computeramerica.com. Now, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and continue on. And the point I was trying to make, before the commercial break, we're talking about quantum computers, and admittedly not very in depth, so don't worry about it. But my point was that, as for a home appliance, where we're currently at is that we have moved from the phase where it takes up the entirety of a laboratory, and now they have. Think of it like the world's most complicated IKEA. And it comes with parts that are labeled, rod A into slot B, and, put quantum computer here. And now it's about the size of, think like maybe two phone, is a phone booth still an adequate way to describe things? Two phone booths standing next to each other. That's about the size that they can sell to large institutions and set them up. And that's about the floor space that they take up. So we're getting there, but they're still massive compared to computers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took a while for supercomputers. I mean, when I was in grad school, the graphics machine that I used was the size of a fridge. It honestly was. And now I have basically a lot more power sitting under my desk in a little ATX case. So it'll happen as long as this technology is stable and is accurate, and the superpositioning, this third sort of 0, 1, and 2 becomes reliable. Then I think it'll be time for it to start
Yeah.
miniaturizing and getting more and more practical. And that's why I think it's probably like half a generation, about a dozen or so years away from coming into your desk or your
Well,
home office.
but again, I would really like to drive people to the actual interview with Dr. Suter. He did a really good job explaining it, although it kind of didn't penetrate my thick skull. But he also pointed out some videos that can explain it as well. I mean, like, you can really look at some of the terminology here where they have a way that you can actually run quantum computing right there, where you can take these logic gates and put them onto this put them onto an editor, just drag and drop, and you can actually create programs for quantum computers right there, and you can run them either on a virtual quantum computer or on the actual one. And they really show that this is possible, that you can do it right now. Anyone can do it. It's just a matter of when is the technology going to be viable. And he said about 20 to 30 years, although of course he has bosses he has to answer to. So if he were as gung-ho as you were, maybe he'd get fired. But I mean, it was a very interesting topic, and he mentioned that traditional computers like the one you, I, Dariush, or anyone out there listening are using, they're not going to go away anytime soon. Quantum computers are going to be used on for certain applications, just like I think we've discussed it with you. The reason that we have a CPU and a GPU is that a CPU just does certain things better and a GPU does certain things better. Same thing with quantum computers and traditional computing. Adding 1 plus 1 for a traditional calculator, super easy. For a quantum computer, that's a lot of work. So yeah, it's going to be a hybrid solution before quantum computers, which they will, completely take over.
Yeah. I would tend to listen to the doctor more than I would to my estimation of 12 years or half a generation or so. But yeah, no, I think this is probably the next evolution of computing, because I don't know how much faster clock speeds are going to get with the traditional CPU the way it's being built now.
You're right. We're up to 5. I think, and they have these competitions all over the world where, people will, much like a quantum computer, there'll be just marvelous feats of engineering where they have like nitrogen-cooled graphics cards, and I think they have to run them for like a solid minute, like 1 minute. I'm not talking like for hours, and they get up to like 10 or 11 gigahertz for clock speed. But that's nowhere near viable. Not practical.
Yeah, I don't want a hydrogen tank in my office closet. There's enough stuff in there that's going to explode as it is now.
and of course all the and all the electricity that you're wasting just to get that kind of clock speed. Right. So 5 gigahertz.
So it's an interesting thing for sure. I think research will benefit greatly from it right now and over the next several years for sure.
Okay, now so we have talked about the iMac, which is, or I should say the iMac and the iMac Pro, which can top out at about $16,000. We've talked about quantum computers, which is something that very, very few people have an understanding of. Let's bring it back down to earth. Your very first topic here, entry-level RTX 1660 cards. Although this did kind of confuse me because for anyone out there who maybe is familiar with Nvidia and their naming scheme, they have like the 1080, 1070, 1060. They have, let's say, the just lately we were talking about the RTX 2080 and things like that. Essentially the 20 line of cards, 2080, 2070, 2060. This is strange. Like the 16 wasn't really a thing. Like we went from 10 to 20. Now we're somewhere in the middle with the GTX 1660. What is this card?
Well, the 20s have ray tracing built in, and the 16s are basically the same but without that built-in ray tracing. I think this is where the more budget-friendly cards come in. Is going to be the 16 level, and the 1660 is basically like the 1060 or the 960 or the 860. It's a little bit better than the 50 range, but is still able to be in the low $200 range for people to still have a discrete video card that they can play games with reasonably well, but not break the bank with a much more expensive 20 level card.
Now, you came on the show in January when RTX was first kind of announced, and when ray tracing, if anyone out there is super interested in that, essentially dynamic lighting in as you play the game, definitely go check out that show. You did a very good job explaining it back then. Not going to go over the whole thing, but you did make a big deal that ray tracing, and which is found on RTX. Is something that people will want in the future. Like, maybe not now, maybe it's not as supported, but ray tracing is a feature of the future, just like HDR, just
Absolutely.
like 4K, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the one thing that'll make your game look better, for sure, at this point, even more than just pure 4K resolution. I think ray tracing will give you a better experience in the look of your game, bar none.
So you think that maybe the GTX 1660 isn't about future-proofing, it's about just kind of budget consciousness?
Yeah, I think so. It's a way to get a faster video card without breaking your bank over the 10 or the 9 series if you're still sporting one of those. But it's not to say that ray tracing is going to be limited just to the 20 series cards from Nvidia, and that's a couple of the topics that I sent for today's show, is to show how ray tracing is starting to infiltrate into other areas, including AMD cards and even card agnostic features where it's working into the game engine itself.
Right, and actually we can go ahead and just kind of leapfrog because I think we're going to run out of time before we get to all the topics, but we were just talking about the iMacs way at the beginning of the show and how they have Radeon Vega graphics cards there. I'm sure that the higher end AMD cards that come with the iMacs will be able to support ray tracing, and you have this article here, RTX off, watch this impressive ray tracing demo running on Radeon Vega. So yeah, let's talk about the fact that ray tracing seems to be coming to, not just Nvidia, but to everyone.
Yeah, I think that goes to speak to how the industry feels, similar to my sentiment, where the ray tracing is the biggest boon to the look of your game. I mean, looking at this demo, this is so much better than what you'll get from a non-ray traced real time, because glass feels like glass. There's so much more reality to the surfacing of what a plastic looks like, what a metal, what a glass, what a tile, what concrete. All of these things that may even be wet. All of those things are going to take on a much more natural look to them. And I think that's far more important than anything else as far as the game engine's concerned. And whether the card makes that easy to do with specific ray tracing cores or not, I think that is a game to be played between the hardware manufacturers and the game engine folks. Because clearly it can be done without dedicated ray tracing cores like the RTX, the 20 series has. So, and this goes to show that it can be, and I believe there's a lot of momentum towards getting ray tracing working well. I think that and high resolution textures are the two biggest pushes. And high resolution textures, that's a lot of video card memory, and there's only so far you're going to be able to load into anybody's video card. So ray tracing seems like that's it's an absolute no-brainer, and I think it's going to come to console games. I think it's going to be in hopefully the new Xbox and PlayStations. or at least they'll have support for it, and then the games will slowly start rolling into ray tracing as well. So I think we're literally and actually on the cusp of this becoming mainstream.
Right, and again, the point of this article seems to be that I guess Nvidia was really pushing their idea of ray tracing,
Of
and
course.
this looks like Crytek has, and who's the maker of, let's see, I believe they gave them, well, Crisis, I'm sure, is one of theirs, and they also mentioned another one, but a different kind of ray tracing, but still getting the same effect that you're talking about, and still making things look, just way better. Like, and honestly,
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that some of the demos, and really, I'm just thinking about the Star Wars one, looked better than this one, but this looked kind of stylized and kind of like, if anyone out there has played kind of Batman Arkham Asylum or any of that Arkham kind of series, it looked like the pre-rendered cinematic cuts for
Right.
kind of the Batman Arkham Asylum, which is good,
Right.
but
Yeah, which is good because the pre-rendered is pre-rendered. It's not part of your gameplay. It's the cinematic. So I think this is a minimum entry point, and
Right.
keep in mind this is coming from a game engine
yeah,
as opposed to a hardware manufacturer that is creating these cores specifically for ray tracing. And it kind of goes back a little bit to the whole OpenCL versus CUDA issue. And you may recall that basically is the protocol for being able to process everyday normal compute things on a video card, like rendering on a video card, as opposed to graphics specific things. So CUDA was something that NVIDIA championed. OpenCL came from the group that gave us OpenGL 3D graphics, which was the broader definition for people to use. So there's a little bit of branding going on here with RTX, but I mean, say what you will, as long as the different video cards are able to ray trace, this is about meaning that they're good enough to handle the calculations.
right.
Just a very basic GPU based, or I'm sorry, CPU based GPU probably wouldn't be able to do even this level. But what I'm saying is the most basic that you can expect from a ray traced real time game will be what you're seeing here in this demo from any card that is reasonable, like probably a 60 level in the NVIDIAs and up.
Yeah, and of course, actually, let's go ahead and jump topic to something that you also have here. It has it's kind of has to do with this, but it's about Nvidia and AMD shipping fewer GPUs, and this is something that maybe people out there, if they haven't been paying attention, because I know that 2017, 2018, very rough year if you were looking to buy a graphics card. Very few places had them available, and if they were available, you were paying 10, 15% markup, for the privilege of buying a GPU. And so a lot of people out there, they may have foregone buying one, buying an RTX or buying even the previous generation before that altogether, just because, hey, it may say that this is $700, but when you can only buy them for $800 to $850 to $900,
Yeah.
people skipped it. So let's talk about this article and the fact that, hey, we're finally getting GPUs available.
Yeah, the news is shipments are down. They've been down for a little while now. A lot of places that sell video cards are resting on the stock that they already have. And usually this sort of means that the market is softening and the sky is falling. Everybody's running around like they're losing out. But what this actually means is that the crypto mining craze, which really artificially bubbled the pricing of cards and the availability of cards, is pretty much over, or at least winding down significantly. So that I believe shipments and sales are going to start returning back to the way they were before the whole Bitcoin mining thing, where people were snatching up, 4, 5, 6 high level video cards to stuff into a machine to try to
Well,
make
yeah,
$20
and
by mining currency.
well,
So
for everyone,
yeah, I think that's what that
and sorry to jump in
signals.
here, but that made sense because for anyone out there who's not familiar, like let's say I actually tried it for like one night with my Titan X, and I didn't like the idea of my Titan X, in here working its little heart out. I
Hmm.
was much more protective of that, but over one night I made about back then, it was on the way up. I made about $3 in Bitcoin. And, $3 for a night, if you extrapolate that to about a day, I was going to make about, $6 a day. And when you extrapolate that to about a year, in 1 year, you would have got the price of the graphics card back. And then if this thing ran
Sure.
for 2 to 3 years constantly, even with electricity, you would make, twice the money. So every graphics card that you could get your hands on, you would make money on. And that was the idea of no availability, is because every single
Hmm.
one of them, you were going to make money.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're basically running that video card nonstop, 24 hours a day, you're going to be using probably um, maybe $1 in electricity per day,
Hmm.
give or take, maybe a little less depending on your rates.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could make some money off of that,
But not anymore.
but I don't know if it's worthwhile because you're decreasing the longevity of your card, running it constantly under load. That's why it made much more sense for people to kind of build rack mount machines that had multiple cards in them so that they could get the benefit of volume.
Hmm.
But I think it's become cost prohibitive for people like you and me to really get into that and do that as much as before. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see normalcy returning to that video card market.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so something I thought was going to happen didn't really happen, or at least I haven't been paying attention close enough. I thought that after the cryptocurrency bubble kind of popped, we would see a flood of used cards, kind of hit the market and actually drive
Hmm.
a lot of prices down. That might be the case. I have not been paying attention. I'm sure, I've warned people that you probably don't want one of these old crypto mining graphics cards because they have been running for a year or two
Yeah,
under
they have a
complete
lot of
load.
miles on them. Yeah, exactly.
Very, very rugged. So, or I should say ragged. So, yep, there you go. But overall, GPU shipments are down, and that means that, like you said, people actually have graphics cards to sell you. So, maybe a good thing, is you
Yeah,
might
I
actually
think
find a
so.
deal. Very, very good. So there's that one. And we have like 5 minutes left. Let's hit a couple of these others. Let's start with Adobe. They're always, fun to talk about because they are, in a lot of cases, an industry standard. What Adobe does, other people
Mhm.
do, and yeah, it makes a difference. So talk about Adobe and what they're doing with 3D objects.
Totally, totally. So, Adobe has bought a company called Allegorithmic, and they
Perfect.
create a suite of tools. One of them is called Substance Designer, Substance Painter, something I'm a little bit more familiar with. These programs allow you to paint textures directly onto 3D geometry.
Hmm.
And their software is it's not unique. There's other industry standard software that allows you to do that by the name of Mari, Mari, which comes from a company called the Foundry. Mari is a professional application and is very expensive, in the thousands of dollars to get your hands on. So it's pretty prohibitive. Allegorithmic has Substance Painter, Substance Designer, which is about being much more tactile, much more hands-on with creating textures for 3D objects. Real brief explanation: when you create 3D geometry, when you create an object like this phone, for example,
Hmm.
and you want to put some sort of texture on it, or like this remote, to be able to put all these colors and all these things on there, you have to prepare this object, and then you create a map in Photoshop where all these buttons, all this text are laid out in a very specific sort of way. And it's not very intuitive. You go back and forth between 3D and Photoshop, back and forth till you get everything to line up correctly. What this software, Substance Painter, for example, allows you to paint directly onto that 3D geometry. There's another program called 3D Coat from another vendor that sort of does the same thing, but I think Mari and Substance Painter are a little bit stronger. They give artists the ability to be able to be more intuitive and more hands-on with taking that object and being able to stencil these things more accurately. You still have to set your geometry up to receive that information, but the disconnect between painting over here and then seeing what it looks like over there and changing and going back and forth is sort of eradicated with this sort of workflow. And the reason why I think this is, I mean, Substance Painter has been around for a little while now and has been in use for quite a while. Mm-hmm. The significance with Adobe picking them up is to speak to how it's coming to the mass market. Photoshop has been around for an incredibly long time, but it was originally created as a professional digital image tool. And it's now become so pervasive in everyday culture that it's become synonymous with editing images. Photoshopping a picture is in the canon of speaking, right? So people talk about it like Kleenex. It's a tissue, but the brand has become sort of the identifier.
Yeah.
So I think Adobe has gone into the 3D space a little bit more and more. I think this is a really important step for them because, believe it or not, you could actually import a 3D object into Photoshop and paint on it. I think that ability was as of, I want to say CS5 or CS 5.5, give or take, where you can actually import a model and then paint on it, but it was incredibly awkward to do, and I don't know if they've gotten much better at it within Photoshop. So them picking up Substance Painter, I think, clues me into the fact that they recognize that this is really important and that 3D is going to become much more important in terms of how people use and create art, just like 2D clip art became so popular with people.
Yeah.
So I think this is indicative of where they're headed.
Yeah, they even said in the article that not only are they getting the tools of Allegorithmic, but they are also getting the talent behind it, and they will be folded into the company. So this is also kind of a recruitment job as well. So
without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, whenever you pick up a company, you're usually getting it for the talent that company has. So I think it'll start getting rolled into Photoshop, or maybe they'll create another sort of tool within the suite, but I would love for this to be in Photoshop proper.
So for anyone out there watching the video portion, we're going to play one more video, and I want Darius' reaction to it. We'll explain it for everyone out there listening on the radio, but this is something that came out yesterday. I'm not sure if you saw it, Darius.
I haven't.
It was making the rounds, but it was changing sketches into photorealistic masterpieces. And this is by Nvidia. This is kind of the same thing, but this is essentially taking artificial intelligence and making photorealistic images by having essentially crude painting skills, and it will automatically edit them to allow you to make these things. So you can see here, everyone out there listening, maybe you draw a very, like, the left and the right screen. The left screen is something like you would see, a 3-year-old paint. And then the right screen is taking images, artificial intelligence, taking things that it can already identify and say, hey, here's what we're getting at. And there you go. Suddenly a mountain.
It's pretty amazing.
What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty amazing. I think it's great. I'd love to see that. It makes things a lot easier for compositing. You're essentially just laying out a simple area for a photo or a texture to be applied to, and I think that's great to have it be so interactive like that.
Right. it's something very different, and something that it really shows that, hey, 3D, AI, all this good stuff, it's all coming together in a very impressive way. So with that being said, we do have music in the background, Dariush. Let's try not to run over this one like we did the commercials. Right. And Dariush, if people want to find out more about you, your writing, where can they go? What can they do? How can they follow you?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, so people can find me on that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'd say the social media platforms are best.
Yep, and we'll definitely throw links into that and get everyone, kind of pointed towards that. And Dariush, thank you so much for coming on. Glad you could make it on. A lot to talk about.
Always
not
happy
enough
to be
time.
on. Thank
and it was
you.
fun. Thank you. All right, everyone. And with that being said, we are about done for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Computer America Show. Until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.